Sarah Martinez stepped into the university gym at 6 a.m., just like she had every morning for the past 3 months. The familiar smell of rubber mats and cleaning supplies filled her nose as she set down her water bottle near the weights. Most students were still sleeping, but Sarah preferred the quiet hours when she could train without curious stares. At 22, Sarah looked like any other college student. She wore simple black workout clothes and kept her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her build was lean but not overly muscular, and she moved with a quiet confidence that most people didn't notice. What they also didn't know was that Sarah had spent the last 4 years in one of the most demanding military training programs in the world. She had been one of only 12 women to complete Navy SEAL training. The program had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had. She learned to survive in freezing water, carry wounded teammates twice her size, and think clearly under pressure that would break most people. But now she was trying to live a normal life as a college student, studying engineering and blending in with her classmates. Sarah started her workout with basic stretches, then moved to the pull-up bars. She could do 50 pull-ups without stopping, but she only did 15. She had learned to hide her true abilities. During her first week at college, she had accidentally lifted weights that made the football players stare. Since then, she was more careful. As she moved to the heavy bag for some light boxing practice, the gym doors opened. 3 men walked in, and Sarah immediately recognized them. Jake Morrison was the leader, a tall guy with blonde hair who thought he owned the campus. He played on the rugby team and loved to intimidate smaller students. Behind him were his friends Marcus and Tony, both equally arrogant and looking for trouble. Sarah had encountered Jake before. 2 weeks ago, he had cornered her friend Lisa outside the library, making inappropriate comments and refusing to leave her alone. Sarah had stepped in and politely asked Jake to stop. He had laughed at her, calling her a little girl who should mind her own business. Sarah had stayed calm and helped Lisa get away, but she could see the anger in Jake's eyes. Men like Jake didn't like being challenged, especially by women. Now Jake was here, and Sarah could tell by the way he looked at her that this wasn't a coincidence. He had probably been watching her routine, waiting for the right moment when the gym was nearly empty. There were only 2 other people in the large space, both wearing headphones and focused on their own workouts. "Well, well," Jake said loudly as he approached Sarah. "Look who we have here. The little hero who thinks she can tell people what to do." Sarah stopped hitting the bag and turned to face him. She kept her expression calm and neutral, just like her instructors had taught her. Never show fear, never show anger, always assess the situation first. "Good morning, Jake," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to work out." Marcus and Tony spread out slightly, moving to her left and right. Sarah noticed this immediately. It was a classic intimidation tactic surrounding someone to make them feel trapped. These guys had probably used it on other students who were too scared to fight back. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," Jake continued, stepping closer. "Made me look bad in front of that girl. I don't like being disrespected, especially by some nobody transfer student. I was just helping a friend," Sarah replied, taking a small step back. Not because she was afraid, but because she was creating space to move if needed. "I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're tough? You think because you work out a little bit you can stand up to guys like us?" The 2 other students in the gym had noticed something was happening. One of them, a young man with glasses, looked worried but didn't approach. The other, a woman on a treadmill, had taken out her earbuds and was watching nervously. "I don't want any trouble," Sarah said, her voice still calm. "Maybe we can talk about this later when you've had time to cool down." This seemed to make Jake angrier. He was used to people backing down immediately, begging or running away. Sarah's calm demeanor was throwing him off, making him feel like he needed to escalate to get the reaction he wanted. "Cool down?" Jake moved even closer, now only 3 feet away. "I think you need to learn some respect. Maybe you need to understand what happens to people who interfere with my business." Marcus chuckled from her left side. "She's probably never been in a real fight in her life. Look how small she is." Tony nodded from the right. "Yeah, Jake. This will be easy. Just scare her a little, she'll learn her lesson." Sarah's military training kicked in automatically. Her mind began calculating distances, exits, and potential weapons. The gym had several heavy objects she could use if necessary. The exit was 20 feet behind Jake, but there were 2 other doors she could reach faster. Her body remained relaxed, but every muscle was ready to respond. "Listen," she said, making one more attempt to defuse the situation. "I understand you're upset, but this isn't the place for this conversation. There are other people here and someone might get hurt." Jake's face turned red with anger. "Are you threatening us? This little girl is actually threatening us." He took another step forward, and Sarah could smell the anger on him. His fists were clenched and she could see he was past the point of listening to reason. Behind him, Marcus and Tony were grinning like they were about to watch a fun show. Sarah had hoped it wouldn't come to this. She had spent months learning to live as a normal college student, making friends, going to classes, trying to forget the intense world she had come from. But some situations couldn't be avoided, and some people only understood one language. The young man with glasses had his phone out now, probably calling campus security. But Sarah knew they were still at least 10 minutes away. The woman on the treadmill had stopped running and was backing toward the door. "Last chance," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a new tone that made Jake hesitate for just a moment. "Walk away, all of you, right now." But Jake had committed himself in front of his friends. Backing down now would make him look weak, and his ego couldn't handle that. He raised his fist, preparing to swing. That's when Sarah Martinez stopped pretending to be just another college student. Jake's fist came toward Sarah's face in a wide, clumsy swing. To him, it probably felt fast and powerful. To Sarah, who had trained against Navy SEALs and Marine instructors, it moved like honey. She stepped slightly to her left, letting Jake's punch sail past her ear. At the same time, she grabbed his wrist with her right hand and his elbow with her left. Using his own forward momentum, she twisted and pulled, sending him stumbling past her and straight into the heavy bag he had been standing in front of. The whole movement took less than 2 seconds. Jake hit the bag with a loud thump and bounced, off confused about what had just happened. He spun around to face Sarah, his face red with embarrassment and fury. "You got lucky," he snarled, shaking his head. "Marcus, Tony, grab her." Both men rushed forward at the same time. This was exactly what Sarah had expected. Most bullies fought the same way, with overwhelming force and no real technique. They counted on size and intimidation, not skill. Marcus reached her first, trying to wrap his arms around her in a bear hug. Sarah ducked under his reaching arms and drove her elbow upward into his solar plexus. The blow knocked the wind out of him instantly, and he doubled over, gasping for air. Tony tried to grab her from behind while she was dealing with Marcus. Sarah heard his footsteps and spun around, catching his reaching arm with both hands. She twisted his wrist in a direction it wasn't meant to go, and Tony yelped in pain, dropping to one knee to relieve the pressure. "Stop fighting us," Jake yelled, charging at her again. This time he tried to tackle her around the waist, using his size advantage. Sarah had dealt with much larger opponents during her training. There had been exercises where she fought against men who outweighed her by 100 pounds. The key wasn't to match their strength, it was to use their strength against them. As Jake dove for her waist, Sarah grabbed him by the shoulders and fell backward, pulling him with her. At the last second, she placed her foot in his stomach and used his momentum to launch him over her head. Jake flew through the air and landed hard on the mat behind her, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. The entire exchange had lasted maybe 30 seconds. All 3 men were down, breathing hard and looking at Sarah with shock and confusion. She stood calmly in the center of them, not even breathing heavily. Marcus was still holding his chest, trying to catch his breath. Tony was cradling his wrist, his face twisted in pain. Jake was flat on his back, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. "How?" Tony gasped. "How did you do that?" Sarah looked down at the 3 of them. She felt no satisfaction in what had happened. In fact, she felt sorry for them. They had been so confident, so sure that they could intimidate and hurt someone they saw as weak. Now they were learning a lesson they had probably needed for a long time. "I tried to warn you," she said quietly. "I asked you to walk away." Jake rolled over and pushed himself up to his hands and knees. His face was purple with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he wheezed. "You think you're so smart? You think you can embarrass us like this?" "I think you embarrassed yourselves," Sarah replied. "I was just trying to work out." The young man with glasses was still recording with his phone, his mouth hanging open. The woman by the treadmill had stopped backing toward the door and was now watching with fascination instead of fear. Marcus finally managed to straighten up, still breathing hard. "What are you?" he asked. "You're not normal. Normal people can't fight like that." Sarah considered how to answer. She had worked so hard to blend in, to live a normal college life. But maybe that had been a mistake. Maybe hiding who she was had actually made things worse, had made people like Jake think they could target her without consequences. "I'm someone who doesn't like bullies," she said finally, "and I'm someone who knows how to stop them." Jake struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. His face was scratched from hitting the mat, and his pride was wounded worse than his body. "You got lucky," he repeated, though his voice lacked conviction now. 3 against 1, and you got lucky. "It wasn't luck," Sarah said, and for the first time she let some of her real self show through. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had survived the most demanding military training in the world, and it wasn't 3 against 1. It was 3 against someone who spent 4 years learning to fight people much more dangerous than you. The 3 men stared at her. Something in her tone made them realize that they had misjudged the situation completely. "Military?" Marcus asked, his voice small. Sarah nodded. "Navy, special operations." The color drained from Jake's face. He had probably watched enough movies to know what that meant, even if he didn't understand the full reality of it. "You're a soldier?" Tony asked, still holding his wrist. "Was," Sarah corrected. "Now I'm a college student trying to get an education. I was hoping to put that part of my life behind me and live normally. But it seems like some people won't let that happen." Jake looked around at his friends, then back at Sarah. Some of his arrogance had returned, but now it was mixed with uncertainty. "So what? You think because you were in the military you can just attack people?" "I didn't attack anyone," Sarah said calmly. "You 3 cornered me and threatened me. You threw the first punch. Everything I did was self-defense, and everyone in this gym saw it." She gestured toward the man with the phone, who nodded vigorously. "She's right," he called out. "They started it. She tried to get them to leave her alone." The woman by the treadmill agreed. They were threatening her, she was just defending herself. Jake realized that his plan had backfired completely. Not only had he and his friends been humiliated, but there were witnesses who would testify that they had been the aggressors. If campus security or the police got involved, they would be in serious trouble. "This isn't over," Jake said again, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied firmly. "It's over for all of you. You're going to leave me alone, you're going to leave my friends alone, and you're going to think very carefully before you corner anyone else in a gym or anywhere else." She took a step toward them, and all 3 men instinctively stepped back. The dynamic had completely changed. They were no longer the predators in this situation. "Do we understand each other?" Sarah asked. The 3 men nodded reluctantly. They helped each other toward the door, moving slowly and wincing with each step. As they reached the exit, Jake turned back one more time. "People are going to hear about this," he said. "Everyone's going to know what you did." Sarah smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "Good," she said. "Maybe that will save both of us some trouble in the future." By noon that same day, the video was everywhere. The young man with glasses, whose name was David Chen, had posted the footage on social media with the caption, "Female student defends herself against 3 bullies in gym." Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times across multiple platforms. Sarah discovered this when she walked into her engineering dynamics class and noticed everyone staring at their phones, then looking at her. Whispered conversations stopped as she passed, and she heard fragments like, "That's her," and "Navy SEAL," and "Did you see what she did to those guys?" She took her usual seat in the middle of the classroom and tried to focus on her textbook, but it was impossible to ignore the attention. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, friend requests, messages from strangers, and interview requests from campus publications. Professor Williams entered the classroom, and Sarah hoped the lesson would provide a distraction, but even he seemed aware of the situation. He glanced at Sarah several times during his lecture, and she could see curiosity in his eyes. After class, Sarah tried to leave quickly, but she was surrounded by students asking questions. "Is it true you're a Navy SEAL? How long were you in the military? Can you teach us to fight like that?" She pushed through the crowd politely but firmly, making her way toward the library where she hoped to find some quiet. But the attention followed her everywhere. Students pointed and whispered as she walked across campus. Some looked at her with admiration, others with fear, and a few with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for zoo animals. In the library, Sarah found a corner table and tried to study, but her concentration was broken every few minutes by someone approaching, to ask questions or just to stare. Finally, she packed up her books and headed back to her dorm room. Her roommate Jennifer was waiting for her with an expression of amazement and concern. "Sarah, what happened? Everyone's talking about you. There's a video of you fighting 3 guys in the gym and people are saying you're some kind of special forces soldier." Sarah sat down on her bed and rubbed her temples. "It's complicated, Jen." "Were you really in the Navy?" Jennifer asked, sitting across from her. They had been roommates for 3 months, and Sarah had never mentioned her military background. "Yes," Sarah admitted. "I spent 4 years in the Navy. I completed SEAL training." Jennifer's eyes widened. "SEAL training? But you're a woman. I thought women couldn't be SEALs." "The policy changed a few years ago," Sarah explained. "I was in one of the first groups that included women. Out of the 12 women who started the program, only 3 of us finished. I was one of them." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Jennifer asked. "That's incredible. You're like a real-life superhero," Sarah sighed. "Because I didn't want this to happen. I wanted to be a normal college student. I wanted people to see me as Sarah who studies engineering, not Sarah the former Navy SEAL. I wanted to leave that life behind and start fresh." Jennifer looked confused. "But why? Being a Navy SEAL is amazing. People would respect you for that." "Some people would," Sarah agreed. "But others would see me as a freak, or a threat, or just someone to gawk at. And some people would want to test me to see if I'm really as tough as they think, like what happened this morning." Her phone rang. Sarah looked at the screen and saw it was her mother calling from California. She had probably seen the video too. "Hi, Mom," Sarah answered. "Sarah, Elena Martinez." Her mother's voice was sharp with concern. "I just saw a video of you fighting 3 boys at school. What is going on?" "It's complicated, Mom. They cornered me in the gym and threatened me. I tried to avoid the fight, but they wouldn't back down. Mija, you promised me you would lay low. At school, you said you wanted a normal life. Fighting people in gymnasiums is not normal." Sarah's mother had been worried when Sarah decided to go to college after leaving the Navy. She had seen how the military training had changed her daughter, making her more serious and alert. She had hoped college would help Sarah reconnect with the young woman she used to be. "I know, Mom. I tried. But sometimes situations happen that you can't control. Are you hurt? Are you in trouble with the school?" "I'm fine physically, and I haven't heard from the administration yet, but there were witnesses who saw that I was defending myself." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, maybe you should come home. This college experiment isn't working if you're getting into fights." "No, Mom. I'm not running away. I have a right to get an education just like anyone else. If people can't handle who I am, that's their problem." After hanging up with her mother, Sarah tried to return to her studies, but her phone continued buzzing with notifications. She finally turned it off and attempted to focus on her engineering homework. Around dinner time, there was a knock on her dorm room door. Jennifer answered it and came back looking worried. "Sarah, there are 3 people outside who say they're from the campus newspaper. They want to interview you about what happened this morning." Sarah shook her head. "Tell them I'm not interested." 10 minutes later, there was another knock. This time it was someone from the local TV news station. Then came a representative from the student government, followed by a professor from the Women's Studies Department who wanted Sarah to speak at an upcoming event about women in combat roles. Each time Sarah declined politely but firmly. She didn't want to become a symbol or a spokesperson. She just wanted to study engineering and live her life. As evening approached, Jennifer suggested they go to the dining hall for dinner. "You can't hide in here forever," she pointed out. "And you need to eat." Sarah knew her roommate was right, but she dreaded facing more stares and questions. Still, she couldn't let fear control her actions. That would go against everything she had learned in the military. The dining hall was crowded with students, and Sarah noticed the volume of conversation drop when she entered. Dozens of pairs of eyes followed her as she made her way through the food line. Some students nodded respectfully, others whispered to their friends, and a few pulled out their phones to take pictures. Sarah and Jennifer found a table in a relatively quiet corner, but it didn't provide much privacy. Throughout the meal, students approached to ask questions, request selfies, or just to tell Sarah how cool they thought she was. One young woman named Lisa approached near the end of dinner. Sarah recognized her as the student she had helped 2 weeks ago when Jake was bothering her outside the library. "Sarah," Lisa said nervously, "I just wanted to thank you for what you did before and for what you did this morning. Jake and his friends have been bullying people on this campus for months. Nobody ever stood up to them because everyone was scared." "You don't need to thank me," Sarah replied. "I just did what anyone should do." "No," Lisa insisted. "Most people would have walked away or pretended not to see. You put yourself at risk to help someone you barely knew. And this morning you showed everyone that bullies don't have to win." Other students nearby overheard this conversation and began nodding in agreement. Sarah realized that while the attention was overwhelming, maybe some good had come from the morning's events. As she and Jennifer walked back to their dorm, Sarah noticed that the looks she was getting from other students had changed slightly. There was still curiosity, but there was also something else: respect, gratitude, and in some cases hope. Maybe, Sarah thought, hiding who she was hadn't been protecting her at all. Maybe it had just been protecting people like Jake who counted on others being afraid to fight back. Back in her room, Sarah turned her phone back on and found dozens of new messages. But among all the interview requests and random comments, there were also messages from students thanking her, sharing their own experiences with bullying, and asking for advice on how to stand up for themselves. For the first time since the incident, Sarah smiled. Perhaps there was a way to balance her desire for a normal college life with the reality of who she was and what she had learned. Maybe she didn't have to choose between hiding her past and being defined by it. 3 days after the gym incident, Sarah received a call from Dean Peterson's office requesting a meeting. As she walked across campus toward the administration building, she noticed that the intense staring had died down somewhat, though people still recognized her. The video had spread beyond the university, gaining national attention as a story about military veterans transitioning to civilian life. Sarah knocked on the dean's door and was invited in. Dean Peterson was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She gestured for Sarah to sit in one of the chairs facing her desk. "Miss Martinez," the dean began, "I'm sure you know why I asked you to come in. The incident in the gymnasium has created quite a stir, both on campus and in the media." Sarah nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes, ma'am. I'm aware of the attention it's received. I've reviewed the video footage and spoken with the witnesses," Dean Peterson continued. "It's clear that you acted in self-defense. Mr. Morrison and his friends initiated the confrontation and threw the first punch. From a disciplinary standpoint, you're not in any trouble." Relief flooded through Sarah. She had been worried that the university might have a zero-tolerance policy that would punish all parties involved in a fight. However, the dean continued, "This situation has raised some questions about support for our military veterans on campus. I had no idea you were a Navy SEAL when you enrolled. That information wasn't in your file." "I didn't think it was relevant to my academic pursuits," Sarah replied. "I'm here to study engineering, not to discuss my military service." Dean Peterson leaned forward slightly. I understand your desire for privacy, but your background is actually quite remarkable. You're one of the first women to complete SEAL training, correct? Yes, ma'am, one of the first 3. That's an extraordinary achievement. The university has been working to improve our support for veteran students, but I realize we may not be addressing the unique needs of someone with your background. Sarah shifted in her chair. Honestly, Dean Peterson, the best support you could give me is to let me blend in as a regular student. I don't want special treatment or recognition, I just want to get my degree. The dean smiled. I respect that, Miss Martinez, but I think you're underestimating the positive impact you could have on other students. Since the video went viral, I've received dozens of emails from students expressing admiration for how you handled the situation. Many of them are young women who say you've inspired them to feel more confident about standing up for themselves. I never asked to be anyone's inspiration, Sarah said quietly. I know you didn't, but sometimes life puts us in positions where we can help others, whether we chose that role or not. Dean Peterson paused, then continued. I have a proposition for you. What if you could help other students learn to defend themselves, but in a structured educational environment? Sarah looked puzzled. What do you mean? The university has been considering adding a self-defense program to our physical education offerings. We've had requests from students, particularly female students, who want to learn basic personal safety skills. Would you consider teaching such a class? The suggestion caught Sarah off guard. I'm not a teacher, Dean Peterson. I'm a student. You have training and experience that far exceeds what most instructors could offer. And you could teach the class as a work-study position, which would help with your expenses. Sarah thought about the messages she had received from students, asking for advice on standing up to bullies. She remembered her own struggles as a teenager, feeling powerless when faced with intimidation or harassment. It would be completely voluntary, the dean added, and we could structure it around your class schedule, maybe 2 sessions per week in the evenings. What would Jake Morrison and his friends think about me teaching self-defense on campus? Sarah asked. Dean Peterson's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Morrison and his friends are no longer your concern. They've been suspended for 2 weeks and are required to complete anger management counseling before they can return. They've also been banned from the gymnasium for the remainder of the semester. This was news to Sarah. She hadn't heard anything about disciplinary action against Jake and his friends. The university takes harassment and intimidation very seriously, the dean continued. The fact that this incident was recorded and witnessed by multiple people made it easy for us to take decisive action. Sarah considered the dean's proposal. Teaching self-defense would mean embracing her military background rather than hiding from it. It would also mean accepting a certain level of public visibility that she had been trying to avoid. But it would also mean helping other students feel safer and more confident. It would mean turning her skills into something positive rather than just a source of unwanted attention. Could I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. If you decide you're interested, we can discuss the details. That evening, Sarah called her mentor from the Navy, Commander Rebecca Torres. Commander Torres had been one of the instructors during Sarah's SEAL training and had become a trusted advisor during her transition to civilian life. I heard about your recent adventure, Commander Torres said with a chuckle. The video has been making rounds in military circles too. It's been complicated, Sarah admitted. I was trying to keep a low profile, and now everyone knows who I am. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. You spent 4 years learning skills that could help people. Why not use them? Sarah explained the dean's proposal about teaching self-defense classes. Commander Torres listened thoughtfully. It sounds like an opportunity to serve in a different way, the commander said. One of the hardest parts of transitioning from military to civilian life is finding a new sense of purpose. Teaching could give you that. But I wanted to put that life behind me, Sarah said. I wanted to be normal. Commander Torres was quiet for a moment. Sarah, you'll never be normal in the conventional sense. Your experiences have made you someone special. The question is whether you're going to see that as a burden or as a gift. After the call, Sarah walked around campus, thinking about the commander's words. She noticed things she hadn't paid attention to before: students walking alone, after dark looking over their shoulders nervously, groups of young women staying close together for safety, the same kind of vulnerability she had once felt herself. The next morning, Sarah returned to Dean Peterson's office. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll teach the self-defense class." Dean Peterson smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. When would you like to start?" "As soon as possible. But I have some conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "First, this isn't about learning to fight. It's about learning to avoid fights and protect yourself when avoidance isn't possible. Second, I want to emphasize de-escalation and situational awareness as much as physical techniques. And third, I want it open to all students, not just women." "Those all sound reasonable," the dean agreed. "One more thing," Sarah added. "I don't want this to become a circus. No media, no publicity campaigns, just a class for students who want to learn." "Understood." As Sarah left the dean's office, she felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving the military: a sense of mission. She was still a college student studying engineering, but now she was also something else. Someone who could help others feel safer and more confident in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to hide from her past, she had missed opportunities to help people. Now, by embracing who she was, she could make a real difference in her classmates' lives. She thought about Jake Morrison and his friends, probably sitting at home nursing their wounds and their wounded pride. They had intended to teach her a lesson about knowing her place. Instead, they had taught her something much more valuable about finding her purpose. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of the university's multi-purpose room, watching 37 students file in for the first self-defense class. The turnout was much higher than anyone had expected. Dean Peterson had anticipated maybe 15 students, but word had spread quickly across campus. The group was diverse, about 2/3 women and 1/3 men, ranging from nervous freshmen to confident seniors. Sarah recognized several faces, including David Chen, the student who had recorded the gym incident, and Lisa, the young woman she had helped with Jake Morrison weeks earlier. Sarah had spent considerable time planning the curriculum. She consulted with her former commander, researched civilian self-defense programs, and developed what she hoped would be a practical, confidence-building course that emphasized safety over aggression. "Welcome, everyone," Sarah began, her voice carrying easily across the room. "I'm Sarah Martinez, and I'll be your instructor for this self-defense course. Before we start, I want to make something clear. This class is not about turning you into fighters. It's about giving you tools to stay safe and confident in potentially dangerous situations." A young man in the back raised his hand. "Is it true you're a Navy SEAL?" Sarah had expected this question. "I'm a Navy veteran with special operations training, yes. But that's not why I'm qualified to teach this class. I'm qualified because I understand what it's like to feel vulnerable, and I've learned techniques that can help ordinary people protect themselves." She gestured for everyone to spread out on the mats that covered the floor. "The most important thing you'll learn in this class isn't how to throw a punch or break someone's grip. It's how to be aware of your surroundings, trust your instincts, and avoid dangerous situations altogether." For the next hour, Sarah led the students through basic awareness exercises. She taught them how to scan their environment, identify potential escape routes, and recognize warning signs of aggressive behavior. She shared stories from her own experience, not dramatic military operations, but ordinary situations where awareness had kept her safe. "Most attacks aren't random," she explained. "Predators look for easy targets, people who seem distracted, isolated, or vulnerable. Simply being alert and confident can make you less attractive to someone looking for trouble." Lisa raised her hand. "What if someone corners you and you can't avoid the situation?" Sarah nodded approvingly. "Good question. Let me show you something." She asked for a volunteer and chose David Chen. "David, I want you to stand behind me and grab my shoulders, like you're going to pull me backward." David looked uncomfortable. "I don't want to hurt you." "You won't," Sarah assured him. "This is about demonstrating principle, not power." When David gently placed his hands on her shoulders, Sarah demonstrated a simple escape technique. She stepped to the side, turned, and created distance between them in one fluid motion. "The key is not to fight strength with strength," she explained. "It's to use angles, timing, and the attacker's expectations against them. Most people who grab someone expect them to pull straight forward or backward. They don't expect lateral movement." The class practiced this technique and several others, including how to break free from wrist grabs and how to create distance when someone gets too close. Sarah emphasized that the goal was always escape, never engagement. "Your job is not to defeat an attacker," she told them. "Your job is to get away safely and call for help." As the class ended, 6 months later, Sarah stood at the podium in the university's largest auditorium, looking out at an audience of nearly 500 people. The annual Student Achievement Award ceremony was drawing to a close, and she had just been presented with the Outstanding Student Leadership Award for her work developing the campus self-defense program. The program had grown far beyond what anyone had imagined. What started as a simple self-defense class had evolved into a comprehensive personal safety initiative that included awareness workshops, bystander intervention training, and peer support networks. Other universities had contacted Sarah asking for guidance on implementing similar programs on their campuses. "When I first came to this university," Sarah began her acceptance speech, "I thought the best way to serve my fellow students was to hide who I was and what I had learned in my previous life. I believed that blending in would protect both me and others from unnecessary complications." She paused, scanning the audience. She could see many familiar faces, students from her classes, professors who had supported the program, and Dean Peterson, who was beaming with pride in the front row. "I was wrong about that. Sometimes our greatest service comes not from hiding our differences, but from embracing them and using them to help others." The audience included several special guests. Commander Torres had flown in from her current assignment to attend the ceremony. Sarah's parents sat in the third row, their faces glowing with pride. Her mother had initially worried about Sarah's decision to take on such a public role, but she had come to understand that her daughter had found a new way to serve others. "The program we've built here isn't really about teaching people to fight," Sarah continued. "It's about teaching them to value themselves enough to stay safe, to trust their instincts, and to look out for each other. It's about building a community where everyone feels empowered to speak up when they see something wrong." In the audience, Sarah could see Jake Morrison sitting with several other students from the self-defense class. Over the past months, Jake had become one of the program's most dedicated participants. He had completed anger management counseling, volunteered as a peer educator in bystander intervention workshops, and was now studying to become a counselor himself. "I've learned that real strength isn't about what you can do to others," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "It's about what you can do for others. It's about using your skills and experiences to make the world a little safer, a little kinder, and a little more just." Lisa, who had become Sarah's assistant instructor, smiled from her seat near the front. She had grown in confidence dramatically over the past months and was now planning to pursue a career in social work, inspired by the positive changes she had seen in herself and others. "The incident that brought me to your attention happened because someone decided to use their size and aggression to intimidate others," Sarah continued. "But what followed was much more important. A community of people deciding to learn from that incident and work together to prevent similar situations in the future." The auditorium was completely silent, everyone hanging on Sarah's words. "We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. We can choose to be victims of our circumstances, or we can choose to become agents of positive change." After the ceremony, there was a reception where Sarah was approached by countless students, faculty, and community members. Many shared stories of how the program had impacted their lives or the lives of people they cared about. David Chen, now a sophomore, told her about how the awareness techniques had helped him avoid a potentially dangerous situation off campus. A senior named Maria explained how the bystander intervention training had given her the confidence to speak up when she witnessed harassment at a party. "The ripple effects go far beyond what you can see," Dean Peterson told Sarah as they talked. Near the refreshment table, students are transferring these skills to their families, their jobs, their communities. You've created something that will impact thousands of people over the years. Later that evening, Sarah walked across campus alone, something she did regularly, now as a way of staying connected to the environment where her students lived and studied. The campus felt different than it had months earlier. Students walked with more confidence, made eye contact more readily, and seemed more aware of their surroundings in a positive, empowering way rather than a fearful one. She passed the gym where everything had started. The incident that had felt like such a setback at the time had actually been the catalyst for the most meaningful work of her life. She thought about the young woman she had been that morning, desperate to hide her past and blend in, convinced that her military experience was something to be ashamed of rather than celebrated. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Commander Torres. "Congratulations on the award," the commander said. "But more importantly, congratulations on finding your calling." "Thank you. I have to admit, this isn't where I thought I'd end up when I left the Navy." "The best missions usually aren't the ones we plan," Commander Torres replied. "They're the ones that find us when we're ready to serve in a new way." As Sarah headed back to her dorm, she reflected on how much her definition of success had changed. 6 months ago, success would have meant maintaining her anonymity, completing her degree without incident, and starting a quiet career as an engineer. Now success meant something entirely different. It meant helping students like Lisa find their voices. It meant watching someone like Jake confront his own behavior and choose to become better. It meant building systems and communities that would continue to protect and empower people long after she graduated. Her phone buzzed with a text message from a student in another state whose university was implementing a program based on Sarah's model. "First class starts next week. 32 students signed up. Thank you for showing us the way." Sarah smiled as she climbed the stairs to her room. She was still studying engineering, still planning for a career in that field. But she had learned that purpose wasn't limited to job titles or career paths. It could be found anywhere you chose to use your gifts in service of others. Jennifer was waiting in their room with a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 plastic cups. "Congratulations, Rumi. Ready to celebrate?" As they toasted Sarah's award, Jennifer asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just let those guys corner you that day? If you had backed down or run away?" Sarah considered the question. "I think about it sometimes. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe Jake and his friends would have continued intimidating people. Maybe I would have finished college quietly and never realized what I was capable of contributing. But that's not what happened," Jennifer pointed out. "No," Sarah agreed, looking out their window at the campus where hundreds of students were living with greater confidence and awareness because of the program they had built together. "That's not what happened." She thought about the young Navy SEAL who had been so proud to complete the most challenging military training in the world, only to feel like that achievement was something to hide in civilian life. That young woman would be amazed to see where courage and authenticity had led. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons or tactics from military training. Sometimes they were fought with vulnerability, community building, and the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. The girl who had been cornered in a gym had discovered that the real victory wasn't in defeating her attackers. It was in transforming that moment of conflict into a lifetime of service, helping others find their own strength and showing them that no one has to face the world's challenges alone.